Kyle McNulty, and you're listening to Secure Ventures, the show that follows cutting-edge founders in the cybersecurity space to understand their plights, glories, and revolutionary products. With me in this episode is Luigi Lenguito. Luigi is CEO and co-founder of Bfore.ai, which detects malicious infrastructure before it is used in an attack. The company has two products today under its broader pre-crime technology umbrella, and we talk about each of those in more detail during the episode. Prior to Bfore.ai, Luigi was a diehard Dell employee. He started in tech support and worked his way to become a VP for solution sales for the EMEA market. He then led EMEA sales for Quest Software, which was a spinout from Dell. He left in 2017 after over 2 decades in total under the Dell family, and he thought he was retiring. However, a year later, he started Bfore.ai after a series of events he describes as serendipitous. In the episode, we discuss the unique founding story, what pre-crime technology entails, and the data supporting its relevance under a broader threat intelligence program. This episode is brought to you by VulnCheck. VulnCheck helps teams defend against weaponized exploits by delivering the most comprehensive vulnerability and exploit intelligence in the market today. VulnCheck gives enterprise and federal teams better, faster data so they can autonomously prevent exploits and reduce risk and outpace adversaries. So what's different about VulnCheck? The company delivers its solutions to teams in machine-readable and consumable formats for a truly autonomous approach to vulnerability prioritization and exploit mitigation. VulnCheck has close to 300 million unique data points, which is 5 times the exploits of ExploitDB, and 200 plus CVEs packaged into complete detection artifacts for proactive teams. VulnCheck provides a full suite of solutions to enable teams with rapid adoption of VulnCheck data, including its community tier of offerings and its enterprise-class solutions, exploit and vulnerability intelligence, and initial access intelligence. With VulnCheck, teams can proactively defend against remote execution events, enrich every data source, and continuously outpace adversaries. If you're interested in learning more about VulnCheck and checking out the free community edition where you can play with their database of known exploited vulnerabilities, please click the link in the show description so they know you came from the podcast. Luigi, thanks for coming on the show.
Hi, Kyle. Thanks to you for inviting me.
Going back to what I believe is the beginning of your career, you worked at tech support for Dell, which was the start of a very long career at Dell. Now, the way I wanted to tee this up is I spoke with Andrew Morris over at Grey Noise last year, and he described tech support as one of the most thrilling jobs in the entire tech world. And so I'm curious to hear from you. Andrew, clearly a very unique character in himself. Do you share this kind of perspective about tech support? What was your experience like?
Yes, listen, I started with computer when I was 4 years old. I still use that keyboard, is here in front of me at home. And so, for me, being tech support, even before Dell, was kind of a natural thing, right? So people would ask me, any sort of, computer question. When I was hired at Dell, actually, it was quite funny because we were like 4 people in the Italian tech support. So it was very, very early stage. And most of my days were like 1 phone call, 2 phone calls. So it was actually quite relaxing. But, eventually it got to speed up as they grew quite fast in Italy. And, to me, it was very interesting because, every call was different than the next. And so I think the thrilling aspect was, okay, what's, what is going to be the next conversation about, right? And more the character of the people. I remember a couple of anecdotes. In one case, I remember a customer that, was a very large corporation in Italy. So they had a lot of servers. So they would call, rather regularly because some hard drive would fail or, some drivers would need to be reinitialized or whatever. And I remember one time, I was giving him some instruction on the DOS prompt to do some resets. And the guy said, Luigi, this is giving me syntax error. And I say, well, did you put a space there? And say, oh, no, I didn't because you didn't tell me. And say, well, you don't need me to tell you to put a space in this command, right? And he say, Luigi, when I'm speaking with you, I shut down my brain. I just execute. And so, that tells you the kind of relationship you can build with people over the phone. And how, probably helped me in a number of my, learning of the the working remotely and distributed, the fact that I have this basic skill of basically helping people without seeing what they're doing, right? Because, obviously phone calls at the time were what we had at tech support. So it's an exciting job, and it's a 9 to 5 job. So at the time it was really, easy for me at 5, you disconnect completely, and it's a different thing than obviously what I've experienced after in my career. So I have good memories out there.
Even the 9 to 5, it sounds like might have been a stretch if you're only taking 1 to 2 calls a day. But
yeah, I mean, this was obviously just a very few months at the very beginning,
right.
but generally speaking, it's a very focused job, right? So because it starts and ends in a phone call.
Yeah.
And because the next phone call from the same customer may land on somebody else in the team. And so it's actually a very interesting, kind of work, because it's all concentrating, and actually we were trained not to, drag our feet after the call with things like logging into the tools or dispatching the pieces and so on, because you want to get into the next call, and there's a lot of metrics around the efficiency of the tech support. A lot of great memories, really. I would say very pleasing job if you obviously like what you do.
Yeah. Okay, so thinking back to the overall career arc, then you mentioned this love for technology at a super young age. You kind of get your feet wet in the industry through a tech support role. You're at Dell, and you're overall liking the experience. I don't even know how to then transition this into the next 12 years that you spend at Dell over the course of that career, but you ended up as, was it a VP of EMEA by the time you actually left?
Correct.
So, I mean, just tell me a little bit more about what it was
the career at Dell for me has been a fantastic journey. First of all, Dell was very meritocratic and growing, and so there were a lot of opportunities. I think in the 18 years I've been at Dell, I've had 26 different jobs. I counted it just when I left. And every job was created for me. So it's not like I was taking somebody else's job. It was just that as I was growing, there were new opportunities. I would suggest, why don't we do that? And or other people were thinking about doing it, and I would be selected for it. And definitely very diverse role, right? Because from tech support, I moved into marketing, and even, I didn't have any marketing background. So it was actually very odd transition, because I created a sales service within tech support to start doing marketing and moving into marketing, because they were much better paid than we were at tech support. So I was, I was trying to get out of tech support, but I couldn't without marketing skills. So anyway, we created a $400 million business, by the way, in less than 12 months. So, and I think it's still running now as a Dell On Call or Prest or Solution Station. I don't know what they call it now. But then from that, I moved into sales program, P&L management, product management, product development, merger and acquisition. Ended up, completing a merger integration of more than 18 software companies that gave birth to the Dell Software Group. And eventually that part of that Dell Software Group was spin off as a Quest Software as a separate company. And that's where I was vice president of solution sales. And then at the end of the first year, when the stand-up separate company was autonomous and healthy, and I was celebrating my 40 years old, I retired.
And then quite the retirement plan you set up for yourself. We'll talk more about the Bfore.ai story and what kind of led you into that. There's one piece that I have to touch on before we get to Bfore.ai, which is your racing background, because my understanding is this was going on both before Dell, but also during Dell to an extent, where you were doing, I think it was either professional or semi-professional kart racing, right? So kind of like go-karts is maybe how people in the US are more familiar with it. Tell me how you kind of got roped into that and what that looked like.
Yeah, I mean, as a kid, I definitely was into go-kart. I started, I think I was 8 years old until I was 20 and moved to France to go work for Dell. I was racing go-karts, but also Formula Ford, Formula 3 as a professional race driver. Yeah. it was a very expensive hobby. So eventually I ran out of money. I had to find a job. So that's why I moved to Dell. But yeah, that bug stayed. And so when I retired from Dell, as I said, in 2017, I actually went back on track, literally with my cars,
Really?
not racing this time, just leisurely doing track days and enjoying time. And so, yes, I did it before Dell and after Dell in the kind of in this intermezzo, if you want, before AI started.
Okay, so you quote unquote retire from Quest, like you mentioned, back in 2017. In 2017/2018, you start racing again, and you start Bfore.ai. Not exactly the expected retirement combination. What did that look like? What was the kind of inspiration for Bfore.ai?
Yeah, so it's actually very serendipitous. So as I was doing my, driving around on tracks, I got invited by this research institute that had full of technologies and patents, but, didn't have a very good way to bring it to market. So they created this program where they invited about 40 people across the globe with entrepreneurial skills to go look to these technologies and see if we had an idea to bring them to market. And now so this was in a Middle East country. So, of all places, probably the most remote one can think about technology finding. Anyway, I go to this program mostly because I wanted to do dune bashing in the desert. So that was really the reason. And then I meet my co-founders, Luciano and Sebastian, in this program. And we get along very well because they're also piston heads and passionate about cars. So we started to talk about all the other things but the technology. But then I will also meet this researcher, and he started to talk to me about this, data pipeline and behavioral analytics he's working on. And to me, it really gave me a flashback to maybe 15, 16 years earlier when Adela was selling network firewall, and customers were always saying, Luigi, great deep packet inspection, new generation firewall, but we're always slow, we're always late. Criminals always have a step in front of us. How come Dell cannot come up with something before the attack? And one customer specifically said, Luigi, you really need to go to this, to the movies. There is this one from Steven Spielberg with Tom Cruise, Minority Report. You'll love it. And maybe the audience will remember the concept of those mutants, Agatha, Arthur, and Dash. They would see into the future and of crimes, and the pre-crime police would stop criminal before crime was even made. And I was struck by the movie is fantastic, by the way, even if it's old, is a classic, and so it's a very nice movie. But I thought, I'm not sure about the mutant aspect of this movie, right? At the time we were speaking more about predictive analytics, big data. So in my head, it was more about, okay, one day, someone will take logs from Windows, log from internet, mix it up with predictive analytics, and come up with the behavior of the criminal and stop them. So now I'm there at this research program, speaking with the researcher. He's talking to me about the patents, and I only can think this is pre-crime. I need to bring it to market. And the destiny wants that 20th Century Fox did not trademark pre-crime as a word. So I trademarked it even before buying the domain. And then we started, trying to make it happen in between COVID, stopping me going around with cars. And so we had a lot of time to work on it. And actually we built Bfore.ai through the COVID period. So,
well, first of all, it's super fascinating. The kind of founder story, I think, is very unique in terms of how you met the co-founders, right? I mean, just this event sounds extremely unique, where you're just bringing kind of potential entrepreneurs together with the chance to just find fascinating technology that they're basically handing over patents. I don't know exactly what the structure is there, but the other piece too, that you and your other co-founder met via just the racing hobby, right? And that kind of shared passion, which led to the connection and kind of other, I guess, teamwork.
There is, in the history of Bfore.ai, a very, very long series of serendipitous events. It just feels like someone from the outside is organizing the world for us to succeed. But yeah, of course, it's part of it is that we create the conditions for them to happen, right? I could have not been, crazy enough to go to this program, right? I have Luciano, my co-founder, always say he felt when he got invited, this was a total scam, right? They say, yo, buy this ticket to Doha in Qatar, and we will eventually reimburse you, right? Something like that. And so it was very, very doubtful. Until he arrived to the place, he was thinking they would be scammed, kidnapped, or God knows what. I was a little bit less worried from that perspective. I've been in those countries before, but yeah, it was a very innovative and progressive thinking of the team that put it all together. Definitely great folks, and a big bet as well. And I think, between the first and the second cohort of that program, they didn't do anymore, but I think in total they must have had like 50, 60 entrepreneurs. I don't want to say, but I think we are the only one, or maybe there's another one, 2 or 3 maximum in market anyway. So it is an extremely rare combination that make company created. And so there they tried the alchemy and a little bit worked, right? So, but I don't think they, especially with Bfore.ai, I don't think anyone at that stage was thinking these like even up. Actually, I have this slide deck that I used for the demo day of that week, and it's surprisingly close to what we are doing now. But you asking me if I had to bet how much we would make it, of that deck, I would have said, listen, this is all a makeup, and I'm very good at with creativity, but it seems very unlikely. I would have given it 0.1% chance of success. And it's been much more successful than we can even think at the time. So,
yeah, let's talk a little bit more about kind of where the company is today and how you got there. My understanding is there's kind of 2 core product offerings. One which is brand protection. So trying to understand if, like Google, for example, has some kind of imitator of like Google with 3 O's. So a domain that's very similar to just google.com that might be trying to rip off some of that traffic, and that would ultimately damage Google's brand. The other example, and you're going to have the chance to correct me on all this, is the kind of predictive intelligence piece, where you're trying to understand different threat indicators for attacker infrastructure and be able to predict before that infrastructure is actually used by an attacker that it's malicious and could be used by an attacker and should therefore be blacklisted on like an IP blacklist, for example. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, I would characterize in a slightly different way. Just as there's a core technology that is pre-crime. That basically the way you have to think about it is like a weather forecast system, where we observe the whole internet and we identify those infrastructure criminals are setting up before they're ready for use. Then we can notify customer of where the attack is going to come from to stop it. Right? So it's really, think of it as this is the weather forecast for internet. And then, yes, we have implemented 2 kind of use cases today that we sell as solutions. The first one, intelligence, is an API where we provide all these, call it subscription to the weather forecast to the customer. They receive it into their own security system, and they preemptively block communication to those sources of attack, so they don't, get impacted by the like of ransomware, data exfiltration, malware, and whatnot. But this is about protecting their own infrastructure. Other customers want to protect their own customers. Think a bank and all the frauds that goes on to bank clients through phishing and credential stealing and account takeovers. So in this case, we not only inform the bank that their brand is being used for an attack and will be used for an attack, we actually block the attack itself. We are able to isolate those malicious infrastructure in few minutes, up to literally removing them from the internet with what we do with takedowns. And so the interesting kind of corollary of this is that not only we prevent even victim 0, so there's no victim of attack anymore because we block before the attack starts. But as we do this with a certain intensity, eventually the criminal go away. So there is a deterrence kind of outcome of this proactive security approach. And it's very interesting for our customer because, after 6-9 months they use Bfore.ai, the level and the volume of attack shrink literally to a few percent. And so it's and then it kind of stays stable. Of course, the attackers come and go, but eventually they learn very quickly that it's a waste of time to attack Bfore.ai customers, and so they go away. And that means that their brand is protected, that there is less cost to, sustain with customer service, and of course, less impact and victims in their customer base.
So my understanding is this kind of deterrence that you mentioned, where you go after attacker infrastructure, can sometimes be a kind of tricky proposition to have a company acting in that kind of way, where it's, let's say, like malicious but with benign intent, right? I mean, how have you navigated that kind of challenge? How does that work in practice?
There is a spectrum, right? So one of the reasons I believe that Bfore.ai would be successful is because when we started, cybersecurity was going totally in a reactive direction. And today we see the result, right? 5 years later. Cybersecurity, for the most part, is firefighting exercises, right? Identify the fire, shut down the fires. I don't know any firefighter that loves fires, by the way. So, I think there's a lot of stress in the cybersecurity teams because, they don't know what happened in the next few hours. And so they have to be always ready, and it's very stressful. So what on the other side of the spectrum, you have, of course, law enforcement and national agencies that do offensive type activities, right? So where they technically go and shut down infrastructure, arrest people, do all the necessary things, up to cyber wars and so on, right? And this is illegal in most countries in the world, and we definitely don't want to touch that space. We leave it to the state institutions. But in the middle, there is this gray zone that I call the active defense. And the active defense is where you are in a posture that is defensive, but you are actively defending yourself. And the way I think to it is, the Iron Dome in Israel. Right? That system is always there, ready to predict the trajectory of rockets coming into Tel Aviv and destroy them in the air before anybody get hurt. Right? It's not offensive because till a rocket get launched, it does nothing. And it's definitely not going to impact the launchers, right? But it's going to destroy the rocket in the air. So active defense is this concept where you're not satisfied just to wait and see. You want to do something to disrupt the criminal activity. In our case, this is done through this preemptive active defense, where we go and isolate the source of the attack. And we do that through partnership with companies like Google Safe Browsing, 9DNS, VirusTotal, Hybrid Analysis by CrowdStrike, by orchestrating their capabilities with our intelligence, we create sort of a shield or a dam, if you want, in the internet. And so that malicious infrastructure may still exist, but the majority of internet cannot talk to it. And so we are, it's like saying to people, that is a bad guy, just don't get close to it and you'll be fine, right? So we're not offending, but we are actively defending ourselves.
Right. So using the kind of ecosystem of tools that are available to kind of effectively wall them off from the internet.
Correct. And then eventually, of course, we do want to get them out, but we do it more through this other process that is the enhanced takedown, where we work with infrastructure provider like registrar, hoster, CDNs, certs, registries, and basically show them that those customers of theirs, because that's what they are actually offending, and abusing of the infrastructure and term of service. And so by providing all the details and the technical reasons, then they get shut down because, they are off term of service. But, these tend to be a little slower, maybe 90% of the time, and it takes 24 hours. And so we want to be much faster than that and be independent also by certain providers that may be in areas where the legality of the things are a little bit more compromised. And so we have created this active defense that is a fast, immediate deployment activity that isolate the problem, and then we have the time, with calm to get down the infrastructure as well.
Huh. Okay, so you mentioned this idea that you started with the kind of pre-crime technology concept, and then you developed these two use cases for brand and for predictive kind of threat intelligence. Tell me a little bit more. How did you actually come up with each of these use cases, and which one did you start with? I assume that one of them was kind of original and the other was added on a little bit later.
Yeah, so the first one was definitely the predictive attack intelligence. It was the natural use case because what do you do when you have the prediction, right? You use them, right? Prediction is great, but if you do nothing with it, it's a waste, right? If I tell you tomorrow is going to rain and you don't go out with an umbrella, what's the point, right? So the predictive attack intelligence was the first one, and it was kind of a rough output of the predictive models. And then what happened is one of our early POV, proof of value, as they were testing this intelligence, one of their supplier was scammed by a brand impersonation. And they went into our intelligence and they saw that we had the information about the brand impersonation 3 weeks before. And so they went to me and said, Luigi, we had the information. We could have done something about it. Can you think about the way to use this against this specific threat of the impersonation against third parties and customers? And that's where the brand protection came up. And we said, okay, well, fine. So if we tie our intelligence to the brand of the customer, that we can do a filter and we get this prediction that are very specific to brand impersonation. And then again, serendipitous, what was happening is we started, the first partner we had was VirusTotal. So we were publishing all this intelligence in VirusTotal. And every now and then we would get some report from people impacted as a false positive, right? So legit websites that we were denouncing as future malicious. At the time we had, maybe 1 or 2% false positive. Today is less than 0.05%, but at the time could have been noticed. And so these people were writing and say, hey, can you remove this flag? It's reducing my website traffic by 80%. And it happened 1, it happened 2, it happened 3, and say, well, if we do this and we're reducing traffic by 80%, then it means we're reducing traffic for the criminals as well by 80%. So this is actually useful. And that's how active defense came up. And then we started to onboard Code 9 DNS and then hybrid analysis and Google Safe Browsing, and we keep adding new partner, Spam House and so on. And the key there is creating this coalition of the willing to stop the traffic going to the malicious infrastructure. So, I think from an entrepreneurial journey perspective, if you want to take away is be passionate about the pain of your customer, not about your technology. The technology is just, what happened to be available at the time to fix that customer pain. People pay you to fix the pain, not for the technology that you provide them.
That's a great story, taking a look at the side effect that you had from your original product and saying, okay, wait a minute, this side effect we could actually spin as a positive and use that as kind of a core feature of a new product offering. Help me understand a little bit more how this fits into the broader threat intelligence landscape. When you think about threat intelligence feeds and honeypots, one of the things I really liked that I saw on your website and I hadn't seen on a threat intelligence company before was I think the term you might have used was overlap with other threat intelligence sources. And I think the number that you had was 3%. So basically 3% of the alerts that you're firing on the predictive threat intelligence side have already been found by other sources. So I'm thinking like those two that I just mentioned, honeypots or threat intelligence feeds more generally, which means that 97% would be novel, unique to this kind of model and platform. I mean, just walk me through that landscape.
Yeah, so a couple of things. First of all, from lay of the land, right? So cyber threat intelligence is a discipline that exists since many, many years. It has good and bad. Generally, the feeling is not very good around cyber threat intelligence. The reason is that it's a guessing game, right? So the way a customer actually gave me this analogy, and I love it. They say, Luigi, cyber threat intelligence is like if we are playing chess, and for me to win against you, I need to learn about all your games in the last 10 years, how you open the game, how you move on the board, what are your motives, when are you more tense, what time of the day when you play you are more effective or less effective. This way, when we are playing, I can guess what you'll do. The problem is, if overnight you come up with a brilliant new move, I'll totally be, surprised and not have a solution for that. He said, what you do at Bfore.ai is actually very different. You know the next move. You know nothing about me. You know nothing about, how I play and my motives and my, deficiencies and whatnot. But you know exactly what happened next. And so you can do something about it. And so that's why I started to call it predictive attack intelligence. And I know that in the industry, people don't like that we come up with new names, but technically it's a new thing. It's you cannot use pre-crime intelligence the same way as you use our colleagues in the industry. They're very good at threat hunting. They're very good for forensics. They're very good for understanding what has happened after an attack. We are zero at these things. It's definitely not usable Bfore.ai for this. But we are the best solution for preemptively blocking attacks before the attack happens, right? So you have to decide, do you want to go inspect what happened after the fires or during the fires and trying to understand why it happened, or do you want to avoid the fires? We are in the second category. We avoid the fires. And sometimes people start to say, oh, Luigi, but this way we cannot understand what the criminal wants to do. Say, okay, so sorry, go somewhere else, and you find another victim that will have the opportunity. There is unfortunately some more law enforcement mentality in security. But anyway, so back to the point. Yes, we do have a number of indicators that show how different is Bfore.ai from the others, and we measure earliness. So what is the, if you want to use a technical word, precognition time from Minority Report between the time we issue the indicators of a future malicious infrastructure and the time those same indicators show up in some other threat intelligence based on detection tools like honeypot or analysts and whatnot, right? So precognition time today as a median of 3 weeks. That means the majority of our prediction falls 3 weeks before the attack get detected by other solutions, but it can be up to 9 months in advance or as short as 6 hours in advance. So it varies depending on the sophistication of the attack. The more the attack is sophisticated, the earlier we will see it. The second thing is the coverage. So you mentioned the 2 to 3%. This is the amount of overlap between our indicators and other indicators during the first 2-3 days that we have issued the indicators. Of course, with time, there will be, new detections. So 3 weeks, is where we see that maybe we have 70% unicity in our feed. 6 months later, maybe we have 40% unicity, right? And more time goes and more the indicators, kind of get replicated. Of course, new indicators come up and replace, other intelligence. And then the third things that we measure is false positive and false negative. False positive because it's very annoying. It creates false alert. It generates waste in security operations. And we're proud of our 0.05% guaranteed. So we actually reimburse customer to get an attack if we have provided them a false positive above 0.05%. And then false negative, of course, these are the worst case scenarios where we have indicated that the infrastructure will be future benign and it turned up to be malicious. And these today is between 4 to 6% of our prediction, and come from two reasons. The first one, internet grows about 5% every month, and we may not have visibility in that new part of internet. And so the criminal have created their infrastructure there and the system just doesn't see it. So we cannot announce it before. And so we need to, that's up to us to stay on top of internet as it grows. And the second one is our models have a certain time to come up with the prediction, and sometimes the attack happen before we have completed the predictions set. And so, a prediction after the fact is worthless, so we count it as a false negative.
That's a great breakdown in terms of understanding kind of the different angles of approaching this kind of intelligence and how it's shared and how it kind of fits into the broader threat intelligence story. We talked about these two key use cases, again, the brand protection and the predictive threat intelligence. Are there any other use cases that you have on the horizon that the team's building towards right now?
Yeah, there are a few. So we are investing in malvertising detection. So this is a new trend where criminals use stolen credit card to buy advertising space on places like Google, Facebook, Instagram, and so on, to publish, call it impersonation advertising. So it looks like good advertising of a bank, but then you click and it brings you on a fake website. So instead of sending email trying to phish, they buy advertising space. And obviously this is not good because it has a lot more credibility than an email, because it's coming up as a top research in Google, or is showing up in the feed in Facebook and so on. And so we want to help our customer avoid to be scammed through this mechanism. So we have a solution for that should come up, during summer. And then we have the social media impersonation. So this is where large, we call them swarm of fake accounts get created to then influence narrative around a specific story of a brand. And so, maybe pushing fake financial data or some information that can harm the brand. We're made aware of cases where the brands have been ransomed, and if they didn't pay, there would be a campaign on X and Facebook to harm the brand, right? So what we want to do is identify the swarm of accounts that spark the virality of messages before they activate, and then inform our customers so that they can prepare maybe with some communication or pre-crisis communication, and of course work with the social media platform to tame down those fake accounts, eventually get rid of them, a little bit what we do on the internet infrastructure. So these are kind of the short term, the social media. It's probably coming in Q3 timeframe after the malvertising. And then the next, call it blue sky for us, is the anti-deepfake technology, where we think I've been speaking about this in the last 2 years, but now it's becoming very, very present. I thought it would be more of a 5-year problem. It's actually accelerating, where a generative AI avatar impersonate a person in a video call and trick the other people in the video call to issue a wire transfer, complete a fraudulent action, whatever it is, right? So what we are doing is adapting our pre-crime technology to human behaviors, so that we can identify through training if are you truly Kyle in this video call that we are having, and the system will check the way you smile, the way you move your eyes, the way you move your head. Compared to other solution in anti-deepfake, they look more at artifacts. Is there the blinking of the eye different because the generative AI is creating a different blinking, or is the color of the skin different from compared to the light angles? And I don't think this solution based on artifacts have a long lifespan, because generative AI become better and better, and will trick it better, even the adversary generative AI. And so we are more tuning on behaviors that are more like fingerprints. And so they're harder even for generative AI to nearly impossible to replicate for generative AI, because generative AI is basically guessing, is not truly replicating.
That's an interesting argument. I haven't heard that distinction between the kind of artifact-based versus behavior-based. I spoke with Ben at Reality Defender, had him on the podcast a couple months ago, and then they obviously just won the RSA Innovation Challenge this last week. So some cool stuff going on in that space, to be sure. But Luigi, thank you so much for the time. Really appreciate the rundown into this whole realm of predictive threat intelligence, all the different use cases that are possible here, and even beyond just what's possible in the future, the different use cases that you're already solving for today. Some of the numbers that you shared are super fascinating to really define what that advantage
and
looks like.
Just to close, I think some people, when I introduce them to this or other introduce them to Bfore.ai, they think this is too good to be true. I can tell you, it's not science fiction. It's not a movie anymore. It is actual. It works, and it is guaranteed. We reimburse 10 times the value of our contract to customer that get impacted if nobody's ever been impacted, but if we miss the prediction. And so, I invite anyone that is listening that is curious to see how this may improve their own posture to contact us, and we'll be very happy to show them the proofs.
Perfect. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, Kyle.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode. You can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and you can write to me at kyle@secureventures.io. I'm Kyle McNulty, and you've been listening to Secure Ventures.